Executives need people who know how to be leaders, who are determined to solve difficult problems, who aren't afraid to be assertive and put themselves out there when it comes to sharing an opinion or asking for what they need. This is why, if you work in a corporate setting and you want to be on track for leadership and you want to get promoted into those executive ranks, you have to pivot away from trying to sound smart, and instead you have to focus on sounding like a leader.
Welcome to The Art of Speaking Up, a podcast that helps professional women access the limitless potential that lies within them. I'm your host, Jessica Guzik, and my mission is to help you find that spark inside you that has the power to transform your career in ways you may not have thought possible. I'm so excited that you're here. And now, on to the show.
Welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for being here and for tuning in. Today's episode is all about what it takes to advance in a corporate setting. If you are someone who is motivated by expanding into leadership roles and getting promoted and seeing how much you can challenge yourself to play a bigger game in your corporate career, then today's episode is for you. And I'm super excited to help you with this because the mission behind my podcast is to help more women become leaders in the corporate space. So what I'm going to do today is first, I'm going to share something that I see people getting very focused on when they are trying to advance and get noticed in a corporate setting. And I want to point that out to you before I share the actual thing that you should be focused on, because I often see people plateauing in their careers because they're getting distracted by what they think they need to be doing to stand out. And so often, the actual thing that you need to do to stand out is very different than what you think you should be doing. So let me start with an area that I see people getting stuck on that I recommend you stop focusing on. And that is the goal of trying to look and sound smart. Here are some examples of how I see that show up for people. People get very focused on getting the words right when they are speaking up in a meeting, or they get very focused on expressing their idea in a way that sounds very intellectual and very smart. They get focused on never fumbling and always expressing themselves very smoothly so they come off as an expert. Another really big one is people get very focused on being able to answer every single question that they get asked. They want to show people that they know their stuff, that they are smart, and that they always have the answer. Now, I am not saying that you don't want to have the answers when you get asked a question, or that you don't want to sound smart when you are speaking. But what I am saying is that sounding smart is not the thing that is going to help you get ahead in a corporate setting. If you are someone who often feels pressure to sound smart and you expend a lot of energy trying to sound smart, something that is super important to realize is that a lot of times the desire to sound smart is coming from a desire to feel safe. A lot of times the internal thought process that we have is something like this. You think to yourself, it feels scary to speak up in this room full of stakeholders. I feel vulnerable. I feel exposed. If I'm able to sound smart and express myself perfectly, that is going to help me feel safe and secure. That is going to guarantee that no one in the room will judge me. So what is happening is we are leaning on sounding smart because we believe that if we sound smart, we won't be judged by other people. And this helps us cope with the feelings of vulnerability and the feelings of being exposed that we often encounter when we are in a room full of people in a professional setting. Now, this is a perfectly normal thing to do. So if you are identifying with this pattern, I just want to emphasize that nothing is wrong with you. This is normal. This is human. And I also want to re-emphasize that sounding smart isn't bad. It's just a distraction. The goal of sounding smart can often distract you from the actual thing that is going to help you get ahead in a corporate environment. And the thing that is going to get you ahead in a corporate environment is demonstrating leadership. So one of the pivots that I really want to encourage you to make in today's episode is I want you to pivot from trying to sound smart to trying to sound like a leader. When I am supporting my clients, I don't teach them any tools to help them sound smart because that is not what is going to help them get ahead in a corporate environment. I teach them tools to sound like a leader because that is what is going to move the needle. So that's what I'll be focusing on for the remainder of today's episode. First, I'm going to help you understand what it means to sound like a leader and why that is so much more important than sounding smart. And then I'm going to give you some concrete tips for how to implement this in your day-to-day so that you can begin speaking up and taking up space in a way that gets you noticed and in a way that helps you develop a reputation that puts you on path to promotion. So first, I want to share an analogy. This analogy is going to help you understand what I mean when I say you want to demonstrate leadership. And it's going to help you understand why leadership is more important than sounding smart. So here's what I want you to imagine. I want you to imagine that you own and manage a car repair shop. Now, you don't repair the cars yourself. You have 7 to 10 employees who do the actual car repairs. You just own the entire operation and you manage the employees. Now, I want you to imagine that you are going to be out of the country for 6 months and you are going to be unable to manage and operate the shop. And you have to choose one employee to temporarily take your position as operator and manager of your car repair shop. So I'm going to give you the profile of 2 different employees who work in your car repair shop. And I want you to think about which one you would appoint to replace you as the operator of the shop. So both of these employees have the same exact performance when it comes to repairing cars. So they both have a high success rate and they're both able to repair cars relatively quickly. So their actual performance is roughly equal, but they have different personalities and you've observed different behaviors from each of them. So let me share what behaviors you've observed, and I want you to be thinking to yourself, which of these do I want to hire to replace me? So the first employee is Clara. The behaviors that you have observed from Clara is that she is super duper intellectual and smart. She has this deep knowledge of every type of car that was ever manufactured and every type of part that's in any type of car. She can name the part. She can describe what it does. She understands the detailed differences between the different parts that are in different brands of cars. She's basically like a walking encyclopedia. If someone picks up a random car part and says, "What is this?" she can name it exactly, no matter what the part is. So that is Clara. Then you have Dana. Dana has a very different personality than Clara. What you've observed from Dana is that she's super proactive. You've noticed that anytime one of your employees is struggling to fix a car, Dana will go over to their station and help them figure out what the problem is and help them solve the obstacle faster. You've also noticed that Dana is assertive. When she needs something to do her job well, she asks you. So if she's missing a particular tool or she feels like her workstation needs to be upgraded, she will let you know that she has that need. Also, whenever there's a problem with a customer, like maybe there's an unhappy customer in the car shop, Dana is always the one who goes over and solves it. So here is my question to you. Before you go out of the country for 6 months, who do you want to appoint to manage and run the shop? Clara or Dana? If it's me making the decision, I am 1000% going with Dana. Well, it's really nice that Clara has knowledge of every single car part and brand ever created. That's probably not going to be the most valuable thing when it comes to the day-to-day operation of the actual shop. If I own this car shop and I know that I'm on the hook for making sure that it runs smoothly, then I want to pick the employee who has demonstrated the leadership skills necessary to make that happen. And Dana's behavior is a much better fit for that because Dana's behavior demonstrates leadership. She is assertive, she is proactive, she solves problems, she navigates through conflicts and tough situations. And that's exactly what I need as the owner of the shop to make sure that my shop can run smoothly. Now, the reason that I'm sharing this analogy with you is because executives and leaders in a corporate setting are often facing the same perspective as the owner and manager of the car shop. They need to find people that they can rely on to solve tough problems and get difficult things done. And being smart, well, it's a great quality to have. We can see from this car shop example, being smart doesn't get it done. Being smart doesn't help when there's an angry customer walking in the door. Being smart isn't useful when an employee is stuck and frustrated and needs someone to come in there and lead them and coach them to find a solution. Being smart isn't the same as being a leader. Executives need people who know how to be leaders, who are determined to solve difficult problems, who aren't afraid to step up when things get messy, who aren't afraid to be assertive and put themselves out there when it comes to sharing an opinion or asking for what they need. This is why, if you work in a corporate setting and you want to be on track for leadership and you want to get promoted into those executive ranks, you have to pivot away from trying to sound smart. And instead, you have to focus on sounding like a leader. Now, this requires inner work. This requires you to build confidence and become more courageous because sounding smart often functions as a psychological security blanket that we use to cover up a lack of confidence. We don't feel confident, so we think to ourselves, if I sound smart, then I'll feel okay to speak up. Now, if you want to get out of that habit and start demonstrating those leadership qualities, you have to build real confidence and develop true courage so that you feel free to speak up without the pressure to sound smart. This is what's going to help you actually be engaged and be present in the conversation and move things forward in a way that demonstrates real leadership. Now, I want to share some tactical tips that will help you understand what it means to show up in the room as a leader. And I cannot emphasize this enough. These are behaviors that you have to take on if you want to break past middle management. Over and over, when I see people who are stuck and haven't been able to break through to that next level of leadership, it is almost always because they aren't aware of what I'm about to share and they're leaning too much on being smart, and they're not leaning on being the person who's seen as a leader. So let's talk about how you do that. I'm going to share 4 different skill sets that will help you demonstrate leadership. So the first one is you have to be able to demonstrate drive. When I say drive, I mean you have to show people that you are driven to get it done. And for most of you listening to this podcast, you probably are very, very driven to get it done and very, very driven to produce quality work. That is something I see across all of my clients. However, that same drive that you bring into your execution, you may not be bringing with you into meetings. So when you're working on something behind the scenes, you might be very willing to put in extra hours to do a good job. And that's a symptom of how driven you are. But then when you enter into a meeting, all of that drive goes away and you view contributing as optional. You're not always a voice in the room. You're not always helping to move things forward. So that same drive that you demonstrate in your day-to-day execution, you may not bring with you into meetings. Now, the issue is the high-up leaders at your company never see your execution. They only ever see you in meetings. So if you are only demonstrating drive when you are working on things behind the scenes, and you are rarely demonstrating drive when you are in the room with executives, they're going to think that you aren't driven because that is all that they are seeing from you. So it is very important to seize those opportunities that you have in the room with them and show them that you have drive. You do this by showing up as someone who is determined to help and who really wants to move things forward. So some examples of behaviors that will help you demonstrate drive are asking questions when you need clarification, sharing suggestions to help push the conversation forward, helping people solve challenges that are coming up as they're discussing things in the room. You want your participation and your voice and your behavior to demonstrate to people that you care. That means speaking up, helping, contributing, and asking questions. That's number 1. The second way that you are going to demonstrate leadership is through assertiveness. Assertiveness means being direct, both in sharing your contributions and advocating for what you need. The biggest thing that I see getting in the way of people being direct is that they are afraid of stepping on other people's toes, and they're afraid that they are going to come off as too aggressive. If you have that fear, I really want you to think back at the example of you owning the car shop and think about your employee, Dana, who is proactive and assertive. As the owner of that car shop, you are not thinking to yourself, oh my gosh, Dana is so aggressive. Every time there's a problem, she gets in there and solves it. Every time she needs something, she asks me for it. No, you're not seeing those traits as negative. You're seeing those traits as positive. Someone who is in a leadership position wants the people underneath them to be assertive, because if the people underneath them are assertive, then the higher up leaders can trust those people more deeply. So a lot of times we have this incorrect thought that assertive equals bad and passive equals good. But in the eyes of the leader, it's the exact opposite. Passive equals bad and assertive equals good. Passive is bad from the perspective of a leader, because if someone's passive, that leader has no idea if that person can be relied on to get something difficult over the line when they are the ones responsible for doing that in the room. So that is the second trait, assertiveness. The third trait that I want you to demonstrate so that people see you as leadership material is thought leadership. Thought leadership doesn't mean being smart. Thought leadership means having the courage to set direction. A good thought leader isn't afraid of sounding stupid. They are willing to share the suggestion that no one else is bringing to the surface. They're willing to ask the question that everyone's afraid to ask because it might be labeled a stupid question, because they're not concerned about looking good. They're concerned about using their brain and their thoughts to help everyone move forward. This is the perspective and the attitude that I want you to bring into a room. I want you to think about it as my job is to help us get to the best solution. That means I cannot stop myself from sharing a suggestion just because I'm worried about what people will think of it. And I can't stop myself from asking a question just because I'm afraid people will think that I'm not smart. I have to share those suggestions and ask those questions so that I can help lead us to the solution. That is what thought leadership is. It is the person who is unafraid to step out and share the suggestion and ask the question for the sake of helping everyone in the room move forward. So that is the third trait that I want you to demonstrate. And the final trait that I want you to demonstrate is called bias to action. Bias to action means that your default response is to take the next step and to take action. That's why it's called bias to action. People who demonstrate bias to action are extremely valuable to an organization because they make great problem solvers. So when you are in a room with people, whether you're running the meeting, whether you're in someone else's meeting, I want you to always be thinking, what's the next step? And how can I use my voice to help us take the next step? So this means if it's your meeting, keeping the meeting on track, getting done what you say you are there to get done, letting everyone in the room know that you have brought them together for a reason and that you have brought them together to take action, and then delivering on that promise and actually executing the deliverable that you set out to achieve at the beginning of the meeting. Now, if you want more detailed help learning how to demonstrate bias to action, I created a free worksheet that guides you step by step on how to speak in a way that demonstrates bias to action. I will link the worksheet in the show notes so that you can click and download it for free. And I recommend you fill out this worksheet before your next meeting. This way, you will have clear talking points that will demonstrate bias to action. So the 4 traits that you want to demonstrate in the room are 1, drive, 2, assertiveness, 3, thought leadership, and 4, bias to action. These traits are far more valuable to your organization than sounding smart or fancy or intellectual. I know that there are a lot of people in corporate environments really posturing and really trying to sound really smart. I promise you that is not the path to executive leadership. The way that we know that this is true is if you look at the leadership of your company, it is not the smartest people who got those leadership positions. And the flip side is true as well. If you hunt through your company and try to find the smartest, most intellectual employees, guaranteed those employees are not always the ones in the leadership positions. Companies need people who are bold. They need people who aren't afraid to have a voice. They need people whose leadership in the room isn't being held back by fear or self-consciousness. And yes, it takes some inner work to cultivate the confidence to be able to have this kind of presence in the room. But I now have worked with over 150 women to help them cultivate that confidence. And I can tell you with full certainty that everyone is capable of building the inner strength and courage required to be bold and speak as a leader in the room. Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode. And if you're realizing that it is time for you to demonstrate those leadership traits, I want to invite you to come work with me inside of my group program, the Art of Speaking Up Academy. Inside this program, I help you with two really important things. Number one, I teach you the communication skills that you need to demonstrate that you are a leader. And number two, I help you build the inner confidence that you need to take up space at this level and to be assertive and be a thought leader in the room. There are so many programs out there that only teach you these surface level skills, and they don't guide you through the inner work of building the confidence you need to have that bigger voice in the room. And this can unfortunately leave you feeling stuck because it's not just about knowing what to say. It's about having the inner strength and courage to actually be able to say it. If you want that full package and you want to learn the communication skills and do the inner work to feel confident and unstoppable, then the Art of Speaking Up Academy was created for you. The absolute best way to find out when you can join this program is to click the link in the show notes and add yourself to the waitlist. After you join the waitlist, you will be first to find out when I open a new cohort. And even better, when you join the waitlist, you get access to exclusive waitlist-only bonuses. I rotate the bonuses, so sometimes you get a free workshop, sometimes you get a private session with me. To find out what the latest bonuses are, get yourself on the waitlist by clicking the link in the show notes. And thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode. I'm wishing you an amazing day, an amazing week, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye.